Welcome to the show, Marissa. How you doing?
I'm doing so well. I'm so happy to be chatting with you again.
Yeah, it's been a minute. It's been a
Yeah.
long time. I see we have like exchanges on Facebook and stuff like that, but we haven't spoken in a while, so I'm super excited to hear more about
Yeah.
what you've been doing and how you're helping therapists these days.
Yeah, it's been a transformation. We first met, what, almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah,
July, August will be 2 years. That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. It's crazy. Time moves fast with marketing and business and all
It
this
really
stuff
does.
and family life and kids and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah. Awesome. Well, I always like to start with who are you? What do you do? Every time I do these things, I always think about like superheroes. Like, what's your superhero power? And then, of
Yeah.
course, what's your origin story? Because I'm a geek
Yeah.
like that. Because I like to know the background. How did you get here, doing what you do now? So I'll just kind of let you take it away. Just introduce yourself and let us know what you do and how you got there.
I love it. Okay, so I think the most kind of interesting part of my story and how I make this work is that I'm a military spouse. So my husband is active duty Army. My undergrad is from a top 20 business school, and I actually studied finance, and then my minor was marketing. So really hard science, hard business. Finance is basically a glorified math degree where you put in numbers and you look at the stock market and it like shoots out an equation at the end. Like
Wow. I don't think
that's
I knew that. Wow.
yeah. So and then after undergrad I worked in some corporate actually in print advertising. So on the corporate side of a big print conglomerate, which was kind of going downhill then because digital was on the rise,
Yeah.
right? So it was a really interesting time to be in this industry. I both had the marketing side of the print advertising, but also the business side. So that was my kind of where I got started. Then I married my husband and we moved from Phoenix, Arizona, the fifth biggest city in the country, to Fairbanks, Alaska, one of the smallest cities in the country. There were no banks, there were no investment firms, there were no print advertising firms. So I was like, it was my quarter life crisis. I was like, what am I going to do?
Oh, wow.
Um, and honestly, what I was really drawn to was life coaching.
Mm.
And I was like, who's going to get life coaching from a 22-year-old? Now, there's lots of 22-year-old life coaches
Oh,
because
yeah.
the industry has changed in 10 years. But back then, I was like, okay, so that doesn't really make sense at this stage. Executive coaching won't fly in Fairbanks, Alaska. So, what am I going to do? And just a lot of soul searching. And that's how I found therapy. And I still knew, okay, if I become a therapist, I still can have a private practice. So that entrepreneurial
Yeah.
spirit was
Yeah.
always there. Um, and so from Alaska, my husband deployed to Afghanistan, and that's when I just hit it hard and got my master's. So I got my master's in 2.5 years, which is fast. And then we ended up moving to Georgia with the Army and did my practicum and internship and got all my licensure hours there.
Hmm.
So it was kind of a whirlwind, but I fell into therapy knowing I wanted to help people and knowing that I wanted to kind of pass along some of the systems and some of the things that I had kind of formulated for myself.
Yeah.
So I would say that's actually where my superpower comes in, is I have the ability to see some of these like really complex or even like complicated structures or endeavors and break them down into just piece by piece, step by step
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And so that's the stuff that I used to do clinically, and that's also the stuff that I do now as a coach and a consultant and educator for therapists.
That's awesome. And how did you make that transition to helping therapists? Like moving from you're doing therapy, that's kind of what you're going after. Where was that sort
Mhm.
of like, hey, this is something that I could do to help
Yeah.
therapists?
So I was working post licensure when my daughter was born, and my 4.5-year-old, she was born with some health concerns, and so I was actually leaving the agency to go tend to her more than I was actually working,
Mm.
and so I couldn't keep my agency job and give her what she needed. So actually came on 1099 as a contractor for the birth center where I had her. because they had like breastfeeding education, they had doulas, they had all that stuff, but they didn't have mental health. So
Mm.
that was my first like entrepreneurial spark, was like, okay, there's a need here and I'm going to pitch them to fill it. And so I came on there, and from there I started doing mom coaching online, because there were a lot of people in the Facebook communities with kids with medical concerns that I was running into.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm navigating it. This is how I'm fighting insurance companies and all of this stuff.
Hmm.
Again, entrepreneurial spark. There's a need here.
Yeah.
And so I was like, why don't you just pay me and I'll walk you through the
Yeah.
process? So I started coaching moms online. Um, Again, get pregnant again. This time I had HG, which, if people aren't familiar, it's a sickness that just knocks you out. It's more than morning sickness. It's really bad.
Mm.
And so I didn't keep that mom coaching business going. I couldn't get out of bed. And
Wow.
so during that bed rest kind of period, it was like, what do I want to really do? And I said, I miss clinical work. I know I'm not probably going back to clinical work right away. So how can I marry all of these experiences, like my corporate training, my finance training, my business background, and my clinical background? So it,
Yeah.
it happened organically. Um, and I've pivoted several times since I've been serving therapists too, because I've kind of just always following that call
Yeah.
of what is that need that from the entrepreneurial side, what is that need in the market that I can
Yeah.
fill? And also from like a congruent, authentic side, what do I want to be doing?
Yeah.
So kind of mixing those together.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I think that that's super encouraging, and hopefully really encouraging for people who are listening, who are building their practice, and they're like, oh, but this is kind of happening over here, and I really like doing this. And I know for myself, before I started my business, it was kind of like, can I do this or can I do this? And then it's like, well, actually, you get to choose and you get to design the life that you want to live, based on family, schedule, needs with your kids and stuff like that. And I think that we're living in such an amazing time that you can do
Yeah,
that. It's no longer like you need this 9 to 5 job, but like you can actually choose the life you want to live. So I think that's
absolutely.
awesome. Thank you for sharing your story. There was
Oh, yeah.
some of it I knew, and some of it was new, and it's just super encouraging. And I just see from just watching you in like Facebook groups and stuff like that, like you build community very well, and you're serving just people very well. And I think it's like, as you're describing your story, I'm like, oh yeah, that would happen. You would start serving moms because it just happens with you. So just wanted to call that out and just say I'm encouraged to see how you do that. You do it very well.
Thank you. That's actually a big compliment, because as I'm growing as an entrepreneur and doing some personal work, that's something I feel like I want to do better at, is the community aspect. So the fact
Yeah.
that, that's being seen, that means a lot to me. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's coming from me, who I struggle with that. Like, I struggle to find the time
Hmm.
to be active on Facebook, and while also running a business. And it's hard
Right.
it's hard to do. I'm also extremely introverted, so
Hmm.
it's more of an ask for me. It takes more energy out of me.
Well, and that's where I would come in with, let's build a system around it.
Right. Yeah.
I systematize
Like,
everything.
coach
That's
me
that
right now.
superpower. Yeah. Right. So that's that superpower that I was talking about. Like, okay, what are you
Yeah.
struggling with? All right, let's build a system out of it. Let's figure out
Right.
something that's going to work for you, feel good, because
Hmm.
we need to feel good as we're building businesses so that
Yeah.
we continue to show up. But also that maybe you schedule, like maybe what you do is you take some time and you just load up your Facebook for like 100 days and you schedule it, spend two
Yeah.
hours doing that, and then you don't have to touch it for another quarter,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So that's where systems come in.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got some of those in place, but I
Yeah.
haven't revisited them in a long time, so I think I need to. Well, I'd love to get into your passive income roadmap. So this is an
Mhm.
awesome guide that I actually downloaded from your website prior to the interview, because I wanted to know a little bit more about what you're doing, and I think that it's just a great conversation to have. And so I thought we could just kind of walk through that and talk a little bit more about how people can create passive income. In addition to seeing clients in their practice, like how all this works.
Yeah.
So I think, like, maybe we could just start at the very beginning. Like, how do you define passive income? What does that even mean? Because I know that there's I'll just let you take it away.
Yeah. Well, if you download the workbook, you'll see that I always have passive in quotes
Yeah.
because passive income is this elusive idea that a lot of people are working towards of, well, I can just be sipping Mai Tais in Mexico and be raking in millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And I do know people that have a very passive income stream and have a very laptop lifestyle. They've been doing it for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Right.
So a lot of people see that end goal and don't realize what it takes to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the definition of passive income would be that you have a product online. It could be a course, it could be an ebook, it could be any kind of digital asset. And it is set up in a way with a system that it sells and that you really aren't doing much. You might have set that system up once, or you might have paid somebody to set that system up for you. And it just kind of runs and you're attracting traffic online. The most common way people think of this is kind of like a Facebook ad, but there's multiple ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're attracting a cold person you've never met online who has no familiarity with you. They go through what's called your funnel and they purchase. That's possible. It really is. But it's not as lucrative as A, it used to be, and B, people make it out to be. And also, it's not as sustainable as it used to be or as people make it out to be. In 2018, really, the very tail end of 2017, definitely halfway through 2018, been a big shift in quote unquote passive income. Even the big guru names that you might follow, the Pat Flynn's, the Amy Porterfields, if you really watch what they're doing, they are making some massive changes to their business structure right now because the pumping money into a funnel and shooting money out at the end, return on investment type thing, is not working the way it used to. So that's kind of my biggest advocacy for people who are wanting to get into online income is that there are trends. And what worked in 2016, 2017 is not necessarily working in 2018, 19. And it's not maybe what might work in 6 months, a year from now. Right. So it's something that you need to pay attention to if it's something that you want to make a long-term income stream. I kind of see this, as real estate investment. There's people who might get on in that bubble and they might purchase a home and flip it or whatever and just at the right time and make money. But people who want to have a real estate income stream for the long term, they're looking at what the market's doing, right? Yeah. This is the same thing with online income. Mm-hmm. If it's, you can get in, shoot some money in a Facebook ad, shoot some money off the outside and have it be like a quick flip, or you can make it a long-term strategy for you. And there's just different approaches to both of those.
Yeah. Can you talk just a little bit more about that long-term strategy and like what is that shift that's happening? Going from just making money quick to the longer game.
Yeah. So this is where that community building comes in that you were kind of just talking about. So in marketing, we call this KLT, know, like, and trust, right? And so when you are going for that quick flip strategy, I just totally made that up. That's not really what it's called, but I think it gives everybody kind of an idea.
It's the KFS.
Yeah, when you're going for that quick flip strategy, like I said, these are cold audience members or cold people that have never actually interacted with you. They just happen to see your post on social media. I'm going to run with the Facebook ad strategy because that's the one people are most familiar with. But you can do this, guys, on Pinterest. Pinterest has ads. You can do this from Instagram ads. There's lots of different ways that could be the top of your funnel. Facebook ads are what people are most familiar with. So you come across, and I bet this has happened to every single person listening. You're scrolling through your feed and you're realizing that like every fifth post is an ad, right? And you've never met these people before, but for some reason they have targeted you. Maybe they are targeting therapists. Maybe they're targeting people with master's degrees or PhDs, or maybe they're targeting whoever. And somehow through an algorithm, through math, they've ended up in your newsfeed. That's the same thing that you can do. You can pay Facebook to make sure you show up in front of random people. And then you're counting on the copy in your Facebook ad and the image in your Facebook ad to resonate with that person enough for, without them knowing you, for them to click through. So the difference between the long game strategy is you're not talking to a cold person, this person who's never met you, is completely unfamiliar with you.
Right.
You're cultivating a community. You're cultivating an audience of people who do know you, who you have served so well that they begin to trust you
Mm-hmm.
and like what you're doing. And so they're voting with their dollar, right? And they're voting in confidence. They're voting in trust. They're spending with you because they believe in you and
Right.
because you serve them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's kind of the main difference that I see.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. I just was just curious to hear a little bit more about, going from that shift of like, yeah, I just have a Facebook ad and then this person bought. But what I love so much about where online marketing is heading, just like what you're talking about with the long term game, is that, and I think it's encouraging for therapists who want to get into passive income, is that you're creating a community, you're creating an audience of people, who trust you. Like you said, know, like, and trust. But when you do that, what's cool about that is to me, it doesn't feel like marketing. Is that you're sharing your knowledge, you're sharing your gifts,
Mm-hmm.
you're sharing your passion and your superpowers with people who can use them. Like, and because I know some people are like, oh, my website's so markety and I don't know how to speak, marketing terms. Like, you don't have to. Like, you can
Exactly.
just serve, just serve,
Mm-hmm.
and all that generosity can come back in the form of income in the future.
And that's why I think therapists are so uniquely qualified. It's funny because everybody I work with, they're like, but I don't have a business background and I just happen to, but you don't need this. I will put a therapist
Right.
against a person with a Harvard MBA as a marketer any day because all marketing is speaking from that place of authenticity, from that place of service, and knowing what somebody's point A and someone's point B is. This is something that a therapist does every day in session, right?
Right.
They sit down with their client. They say, how are you today? They know that they're moving from anxiety to more tolerance of anxiety or less anxiety or whatever that is. And they're
Mm-hmm.
able to look at them where they are that day on that journey and speak to them. And I mean, therapy language, meet them where they're at,
Yeah.
right? That's all marketing is.
Yeah.
So when I help them see that, they're like, oh. And so what you were just saying
Haha.
with that education and that expertise and that service, therapists are so primed for this. They're so ready for this
Absolutely.
because that's all they do. That's what
Right.
they do for a living in session. You're just taking it from a brick and mortar box, or if you're doing online therapy, an online therapy delivery to an online income delivery. It's just a
Right.
different box. It's just
Mm-hmm.
a different container, but what you're doing is the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, let's start getting into a little bit more about, okay, how do we do this? So
Hmm.
let's say somebody's got an idea. I want to
Yeah.
think about maybe building a course or an ebook, whatever it is. So
Hmm.
what's step one of getting into an extra income stream in your practice?
Yeah, and this is that long game approach. I'll mention where ads and stuff come in my philosophy as well. But for that long game, sustainable building the community approach, the first thing to do is validate your offer. Validate that idea that you have. Um, because you're a therapist, you have some insight that a normal business owner might not have because you've been working with this person for a long time. So I think it's easier for you to tap into what they need. Something in business that we talk about is we're selling them what they want, but we're giving them what they need.
Mm,
Right. So we
yeah.
have to package this in a like I'm just coming up with a random client. Like one of my students, she's doing a membership site for divorcees. So she works with divorced women and in her practice and co-parenting and all that stuff. But through her work in the clinical space, she's seen what they need in a non-clinical way as well. So that's what she's doing is she's creating an online income stream for them. Now, what she's selling them, what they want is financial advice or financial peace. They've just lost half their income with their spouse leaving and all this stuff.
Right.
So now what they want is some stability.
Mm,
What they actually need is some community. What they
mm,
actually need is to know they're not alone, right?
Right.
So she's selling them, hey, yeah, I'm going to teach you about finances. I'm going to teach you about how to make friends after your divorce, or reconnect with those friendships that got lost in your marriage, kind of thing. But what she's actually selling them is a place to not feel alone.
Right.
So we want to do that. We need to think about, okay, here's my idea. How is the person that I'm selling to going to view this idea? And is it something they're even going to spend money on? That's the first question we need to answer. And often our idea is kind of on, but we might need to change the way we deliver it a little bit, or we might need to make some tweaks in the structure or whatever. And that's what we get when we speak to people who are in our target market. That's what we get from these validation interviews. And so that's kind of the first step. Why go forward headstrong and like full charge into creating a course? Courses take hundreds of hours, guys. So
Yes.
what I hate to see is people spending those hundreds of hours and then never asking anybody if that's what they want.
Right.
And then they get to the end and they're like, this thing isn't selling. And it's like, well, you kind of skipped some steps.
Right. Like, did you ask anybody if they wanted
Hmm.
it? So
Yeah.
you mentioned validation interviews. What's that?
Hmm. Yeah. So when people work with me, I encourage them to hop on the phone with some people, and I give them a script of, what to ask when they're on the phone. This could be like in my student's case with the divorcees. If she's divorced herself, so she might know some other people in her town or whatever that are divorced, or she might know people that she's just connected with, her friends or whatever.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be people you find online. But it can, once you've got kind of like a validation, like a local couple people, those people are going to be in your same culture. They're going to be in your same community. So they're going to think very much like you. So it's not a bad idea to jump in some Facebook groups and say, hey, is anybody here recently divorced? And would you hop on? Could I buy you a cup of coffee for 30 minutes of your time on Zoom? You get them a $10 Starbucks gift card, which is a write-off, by the way. So make sure you're keeping track of those things. You grab them a $10 Starbucks gift card, you hop on a Zoom call, and you just ask, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. And is this something that sounds interesting to you? What would you want to see in a program like this? What would you not want? What don't you need? Like, what can you do on your own that you don't need to pay somebody for? Just get kind of a idea of their story. It's not a
Yeah.
bad idea to record these too, because you can go and take their exact language and use it on your sales page, or use it in
Yes.
those Facebook ads if you're running ads or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then at the very end, this is the hardest question for my students, but to say, would you buy this and what would you pay for it?
Mm.
And to get that, it's scary to ask that question. And somebody say, I don't think I need this right now. And then you say, well, what would make you want to buy it, right? You have to
Right.
kind of follow up.
Keep digging.
Uh, yeah. Why wouldn't you buy it at this time? What is it missing? And then just keep going. And then maybe they'll be like, yeah, I'd buy it, and I think I'd pay, $150. Okay, then you have the basis. That might not be the price that you charge for your course at the end, but it's at least validated that somebody's interested in this.
Right.
It makes you want to go forth and start. I don't say create yet. We don't even get to the asset creation part at this point, but to go forth with the idea, knowing, okay, this is actually a good idea.
Yeah. Right. That's great. Awesome. Well, once they do that validation process, then where do we go from there?
Yeah. Then we talk about branding. And you can, I'm sure, comment on this from the design standpoint, but from the messaging standpoint, we need to brand this. So I'm just running with the student's example of the divorce support group, but there's probably hundreds of divorce support groups out there, right? And at first, that's intimidating. People think, well, if there's already 100 out there and mine is the 101st, what's going to make someone buy mine?
Hmm.
Well, you brand it, right? You have to
Right.
position it. So, the first thing that I want to mention is that when there are other assets out there, when there are other courses, when there's other ebooks, when there's other things out there, that itself is also validation. Because if those are selling, it means that people want them. If there were no courses on your idea, no podcasts on your idea, no ebooks, then that might be a sign, all right, well, maybe this isn't a good idea, right?
Right.
So we're switching from that scarcity outlook to an abundant outlook. Like,
Yeah.
okay, there's multiple out there. Now I just need to talk about mine differently so that people see the value in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's what branding is. So we talk about, how do I deliver this differently? I think everybody listening to this has one brand piece in the fact that they're a therapist. So another coach um, who might be offering a anxiety course or a divorce support course, they don't have the therapeutic clinical background that you do. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one branding position that you have right off the bat.
Yeah.
But just figuring out what is unique about my program versus these others. Maybe you do it differently. It's a membership site versus a course, or maybe you um, come at it from like a mindset perspective versus like a strategy perspective or something. Just the way that you do it could be just a little bit different, and that could be the thing that
Yeah.
sets it apart.
Yeah. And I think too, like, it also comes back to people's personalities too. Like, I think that just knowing
Hmm.
that you have something within you that nobody else has, and that's what, back to that marketing piece where it doesn't feel like marketing, is finding out like what makes you come alive, and knowing that people, when they know, like, and trust you, it doesn't matter if you're delivering something similar to somebody else, because there's a way that you do it that is completely unique to you. And so I just want to encourage listeners for that, because I know that some
Hmm.
people are like, well, but this person's doing this person's doing that. Like, yeah, but you can do it differently.
No one is you.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've done a little bit of branding, ideas validated. Now what?
So here's what I like to do is I like to start setting up the sales funnel at this point. And there's a reason for that, I'll explain it. So we need to get people on our email list. Statistics show that people buy from email much more than they buy from social media, much more than they buy from a Facebook group. It's not to say you can't make sales from there, but really where people expect to spend their money is in their email list.
Hmm.
So we want to start cultivating that as part of the community too. So you can have an external, like a community where you show up face to face. That could be Instagram Live, that could be Facebook Live, that could be somewhere else. But also, this idea of an email list is a sense of community as well, where you might be able to share a personal story. You might be able to ask for feedback. You might be able to ask direct questions of your audience, and people feel that email is intimate,
Mm-hmm.
and so that they're willing to exchange there. It's not as visual as like a Facebook group, so their name and their picture aren't necessarily attached with their response in front of a bunch of people.
Right.
So sometimes people feel more comfortable being vulnerable in email.
Hmm.
So it's a really good place to start cultivating your community. And we do this through an opt-in. So it could be a free download. It could be a quiz. Quizzes are really popular right now. But just whatever kind of free thing that you can give away that will attract people to your audience. The reason I do this here is because if that opt-in is not converting, then it's a sign that something's off with your marketing.
Right.
Right? So what happens is often people are paying the Facebook ad to go straight here. And so again, you're paying for that conversion, you're paying for that traffic. So it's hard to tell what the audience actually organically wants. So I always like to test an organic conversion rate before I talk about ads. Because if we're converting organically really well, above 20-30%, again, the market is telling us they want this,
Right. Mm-hmm.
you know? So this is why I do that kind of stuff here. You can also add in what's called a tripwire, which is kind of cool. People opt into your email list here, and then you can sell them a very low priced product, $27 here. The way that I do this is I have a workbook that is an opt in, and then I have a video training that basically walks them through the workbook, but it's me explaining it face to face on video for $27 that people can purchase. And that also is a validation piece, because how well that
Right.
tripwire is selling lets me know, okay, again, people are willing to put money down on this topic, even
Yeah.
though it's a low price at this point. Um, it's still, people are ponying up with their wallets. They're voting
Mm-hmm.
with that dollar. It's a
Yeah.
vote of consumerism. It's a vote of confidence. It lets you know that your topic is right on for your audience, that you're
Yeah.
getting the right people.
Yeah, it's that extra validation too.
Mm-hmm.
Even deeper validation as you're starting to work out your marketing and your messaging and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is the place to tweak. So if your opt-in isn't converting, going back to that same student, she's using a quiz for her divorce support group and it wasn't working very well. We
Mm-hmm.
weren't getting the traffic we thought, and then when people were clicking, they weren't finishing the quiz. And I said, "Let's change our title. Let's change our quiz title right now and see what happens." Just changing the title made her stats improve.
Wow.
So before she's ever selling a product, before she's ever offering anything for sale, she's testing and tweaking now, way early in the process.
Right.
And so just by changing that title, she saw the jump in traffic that she wanted. She saw an increase in conversions that she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So we're building in benchmarks along the way
Yeah.
to let us know we're on the right track. And it helps us tweak way earlier, like I said, in the process. And these are much smaller tweaks, a title versus the 100 hours you spent on a course and now you have to go and
Right.
redo your modules or redo your
Yeah.
lesson, right?
Absolutely.
So building these pieces in along the way really makes it so that the sales process at the end is a lot easier because
Mm-hmm.
you've got the validation, you've got the setup, you know for a fact you're attracting the right people who are
Mm-hmm.
interested in buying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And what are, so you talk about like building an email list. Is this where you start to get into like the technology piece? You know, everyone
Yeah.
gets a little bit overwhelmed by all the different options and stuff. But like, what are a couple of just like the basics? Like someone just wants to get started building their email list, starting their funnel. Like, what are some basics that people can use to get started?
Yeah, the first place people often go is MailChimp, and I actually don't recommend MailChimp. It's not very user friendly. It's not intuitive. It's hard for me to figure out, and I've been doing this for 5 years. And they do have a free tier, which is nice. I always recommend starting with a service that has a free tier
Mm-hmm.
because you get to play around and you're not worried about, it costing you money if you have four
Yeah.
people on your list. But it also, when you get to the paid tiers, it is more expensive than some of its contemporaries, some other services that are available. So that's not the one that I recommend. They just have a really good brand and really good recognition in the
Yeah.
market. So that's why a lot of people go with them. Another one that's popular is Convertkit. I don't recommend starting with them either personally because they're $39 a month to start.
Mm-hmm.
So you're ponying up $40 whether you have one person or
Right.
1,000 people.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a little bit of pressure that I don't think you need at the beginning of this. I'm a bootstrapper. Like I still, 5 years in, my monthly expenses are $140.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, that's what's also cool about online income is that the overhead is so low compared to those of us who
Yeah.
are like paying for offices for our practice and paying for all of those things,
Yeah.
There's a lot less risk getting started with this.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can keep your costs low and put in the time up front.
Yeah.
So there's a few that I do recommend. The one that I use and really do recommend is MailerLite. Again, there is the free tier. And then when you get to the paid tier, it's less expensive than MailChimp, like tier for tier, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
Another one that people really like is ActiveCampaign. It has visual like mapping. So if you are a visual person, it's very intuitive. That's the stuff that MailChimp doesn't have.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two that I think are really great starting points.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. I just want to second the part about MailChimp. I started using them when I first started out doing online marketing, and it worked okay for a little bit. But then as I was starting to get into more complex things, it was just very confusing. And I was trying to like hack MailChimp together to make everything work. And I was like, I kind of wish I didn't start with MailChimp. If someone's listening and you're on MailChimp and it's working for you, like that's great. I don't want to say that that's terrible, but I agree that there are other systems that would work a little bit better.
Yeah.
All right. So you're starting to build your email list. You got some systems in place there. So what's next?
Yeah. So now we're getting into what's known as your sales funnel. This is a buzzword that a lot of people are like, oh, okay, your funnel, right? That your funnel consists of 3 parts. The top, to say something fancy, is called your lead acquisition. This just means getting eyeballs, getting new eyeballs. Your middle of your funnel is lead nurturing, which is just that know, like, and trust. Let's build that community. Let's build that trusting factor there.
Right.
The bottom of your funnel is lead conversion. This is where you're starting to get the sales. This is where you're starting to move them from a follower to a consumer of your product. This is where Facebook ads can come in. People pay money to get them to get cold leads into their funnel. But this is also where content marketing comes in. And I know you talk a lot about blogging. So organically, if you don't want to pay, what you could do is start to create content. This podcast is content. Blogs are content. YouTube videos are content. This is where the time versus money relationship comes in. You can not create content, and you can just put people through your funnel by paying. And again, circumvent that know, like, and trust factor. The issue with that is things like in 2018, the cost of Facebook ads quadrupled.
Right.
So what you used to be able to get for $1 per lead is now costing $4 per lead. So it's getting more expensive. It's not to say that it can't work. It's just you're circumventing, like we said, that know, like, and trust factor. So at the end, your sales look different than when you have cultivated that community aspect.
Right.
The other thing that content lets you do is going back to that branding piece. There might be 10 people out there talking about anxiety, or thousands, really. There might be thousands of people talking about divorce, but no one has your voice. That's what Daniel was saying. So no one has your voice, which allows you to put your spin and your take and your angle and your thoughts out there on the topic.
Right. Yeah. I am huge on, like, the content piece, like, because just like you said, like, it helps you kind of work out your messaging, and also, just to take it a step further too, there's the SEO aspect of it. Like, if you're consistently blogging or adding content, even on YouTube, I mean, YouTube is basically a search engine. Over time, all that stuff's going to point back to you, and I've seen this, in my own business, or starting out. I didn't have much traffic, but I posted a blog post every week for like 2 years, and now a lot of people find me through Google, actually, because I've had that, and also Pinterest. So I've had that content going out, and it up front, you put in the time, but then things grow, hopefully, and then you can put in the money and, like, kind of layer the money on top of the time that you've already put in, and that's kind of like, that's where you can hit those traffic explosions, which get me geekily excited.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the biggest barrier to this long-term strategy versus the flip strategy that we were talking about a little bit earlier is there's a time commitment here. There is a time commitment here. But if your practice is rocket and rolling, like, this is when you have, if that, income stream is working for you, this is when you have the luxury of time to put into something like this.
Right.
And you also might have a little extra money from your practice. So why not, layer that on top of the time? But I never advocate skipping the content creation piece.
Yeah.
I mean, if this is going to be something long term for you, even just creating content, like, I go back, and you probably do the same thing. I go back and look at my top listened podcasts or my top viewed blog posts or whatever. And I'm like, okay, there was something here that people liked. Let me see if it's the topic or if it's the delivery or what it is. So I can replicate this for business standpoint, but also going back to that service piece. People want to know more about this. This is important to people. How can I give them what's important to them?
Yep, absolutely. I do that all the time. I just did that last week, actually. I was looking through Google Analytics, and for the longest time, I've got this one blog post that's really just a list of therapy website examples, and that, for some reason, has just done really well in Google. And so I take a look at it, and it's actually Therapists in Atlanta is the blog post, like, examples of websites. And I just did a website for somebody in Atlanta, so I updated the blog post, and also lets Google know it's changing, it's growing. So it helps you in the future grow. It helps you learn what people are interested in. And then also gives you those extra opportunities that you maybe might have missed otherwise. Like, maybe there needs to be a lead magnet on my best performing blog post, stuff like that.
Yeah. And so the next phase, and content plays into this as well, is nurturing those leads. That's in that middle of the funnel. So the content you create actually does dual purpose because it's working at that lead acquisition level. It's working at that eyeball level
Yeah.
where new people can come to you, but it's also working at that nurture level with the people who are already maybe on your list, the people who are already following along with you. That's that service piece.
Yeah.
So you're continuing to give them more service. You're continuing to give them more value. And it makes them trust you more. It makes them know that you are the go-to resource. It solidifies that relationship.
Yeah. So does that happen? That's just kind of like ongoing, or are we still talking about like within the sales funnel aspect, or is it all really the sales funnel?
Yeah. So what I say is once you have steps 1, 2, and 3 done, which is that validation, that branding, and that technology piece, you're really working 4, 5, and 6, steps 4, 5, and 6, just over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Which is creating content, nurturing your community. And then the last piece that we haven't yet talked about is the visibility. So that's things like this, going on podcasts or um, just connecting with others in your community, that relationship piece. Just because we're talking about online marketing doesn't
Yeah.
mean that relationships aren't important.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that really covers a lot. We covered a lot here. And
Yeah.
yeah, and for anybody listening, Marissa has offered her passive income roadmap guide for download. So you'll find that in the show notes for this episode. I guess to wrap it up, are there any mistakes you see people make when they're working on their passive income sales funnels, or any steps they skip? Like, what do you see happen pretty often?
Yeah, I think the big step that they skip is the know, like, and trust thing. Going straight for ads. I
Yeah.
really don't recommend that strategy. I think ads are a powerful tool and I think they have a time and place, but I'd love to see how some of this stuff converts for you organically and set it up as benchmarks along the way so that you can kind of guarantee that your sales are going to be there if the benchmarks that you've set up earlier are working. And making those tweaks earlier on in the process if you need to.
Yeah.
And then also the idea of the time versus money relationship. When you see those people who are talking about passive income, if they're advertising that they've done it quickly, it's because they're spending a lot of money. They're
Mm-hmm.
spending a lot of money in Facebook ads, or they've hired somebody to do their Facebook ads.
Right.
They're spend, they're what isn't always there is the transparency piece. And so it's either taken them 10 years to get there or it's taken them thousands and thousands of dollars to get there.
Right. And two, with going back to the content, if someone's been building content for 6 years and then they run a Facebook ad to the people who are already on their email list, those people are going to convert
Mm-hmm.
at a much lower cost and also much much more
Yeah.
easier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, I'll also like to ask, is there a book you've recently read that's impacted you as we come out of all this technology speak and deep
Oh.
marketing stuff? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's good. Okay, so I actually just got back from a retreat, and I haven't read the books that we talked about there, but I have
Mm,
several on my list. And the person that I'm actually following, because of this retreat is, it's the Robcast, which is a podcast. I can't think of his name now. It's just escaped me. But he used to be like an evangelical preacher,
hmm.
and he's now working on mindset for entrepreneurs. So
Cool.
he's had a big pivot himself. But it's a little bit of that softer side that I mentioned earlier in the interview that's kind
Yeah.
of been missing because I think when you start business, you just do, 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 do. And then I think there comes to a place where you have to start being and
Yeah.
doing as well.
Yeah.
Um, so that's not a book, but it's a resource that I've just started getting into. Some of the mindset and the inner work that comes that you need to start doing when you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. Awesome. Well, how can people find you online?
Yeah, the easiest place is just marissalawton.com. Or if you like podcasts, if you're listening to this one, I have one as well called Empathy Rising. And it's all about, scaling strategy for the solo therapist. So if you're interested in doing some of this additional revenue streams, that's the place to head over to listen to that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, we'll link to those things in the show notes for sure. But thank you so much for your time, Marissa. I really
You're
appreciate you
so
being on
welcome.
the
This
show.
was so fun. We need
Yeah.
to talk more.
Yeah. I can geek out on this stuff all day long. So it's
Yeah.
good. Awesome. Well, thanks
Awesome.
again.
Bye.